Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting, where we talk about the Winnipeg Jets. I'm joined again today by Winnipeg Sun hockey writer Scott Billeck, and we are looking right away at reviewing a couple of Jets games that didn't go so well for them. They ended up losing to the Washington Capitals, and they lost to the Vegas Golden Knights, two of the better teams in the National Hockey League, but both those games were in Winnipeg. Both those games started with the Jets being very competitive and in good situations, looking like they were running with the big dogs, so to speak. And then things kind of fell off, and they ended up losing both those games. So back-to-back losses at home, back-to-back losses against very strong teams. Scott, what do you take from those two games, and how do you think it'll look going forward with the Jets?
Yeah, I mean, the Washington game was a bit of a dud, right? I mean, there's no really other way to kind of put it. I mean, the Jets didn't play a good game and kind of got beat. You can't allow a team to score four on you in the second period and then expect to claw that back. I mean, I know the Jets said they believed that they had the ability to come back, but that's a tough ask, right? I mean, it's not every day that any team's really putting up four goals in a period, and then to ask in the final frame to claw all of that back. It's difficult. Vegas is a different one. I thought the Jets played well in the first period for the first 10, even 15 minutes, arguably. It was a 1-1 game through there, and then they got a little lackluster in the last 5 minutes of that period, allowed 8 shots, and Mark Stone scored a goal with 1.6 seconds left to go up 2-1. It went back and forth all the way through the game, and that's the thing. Like, they played, that was the best game they played against Vegas, even though it was relatively sloppy hockey. But the problem was that, well, all of that aside, it's obvious it's something the Jets are sick too at the moment. And Rick Bowness talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois missing half a period because he's really sick. A couple of guys were taking IVs after the game. So you can kind of understand that there's a little bit of stuff going on there in terms of sickness in the room. The biggest thing here for the Jets is to not let this slide into a three game. They haven't lost consecutive games or three games this year. This was only the second time they had lost consecutive games. They've talked a lot about rebounding and all that kind of stuff. They had a better game against Vegas than they did Washington, so they rebounded in a way, but they didn't find a win. And so they're in this spot now where it's Nashville comes to town on Thursday. They might be dealing with a little bit of the flu or whatever the illness is that's going through there. And now they got to find a way to kind of really pull it together and win a hockey game.
Well, the Jets, one thing they haven't done a lot of this year is give up a bunch of goals, and they've given up 5 in consecutive games, also an empty netter against Vegas. But that's a bit concerning to me that they weren't able to lock it down so much against those
Yeah.
teams. They've been so good at that. They've got that great goaltender back there, but he's in net for both those games when the scores run up, and defensively just not as tight, right? Like, and especially that late goal in the first period by Mark Stone, it was just, there was a chance to chip that puck out of the zone, and it wasn't done. Gets back to the blue line, shot on net, rebound, it's in the net. It's like, these are little things that the Jets haven't been doing. They're just looking like a couple of habits creeping in that they haven't been doing lately. And as you said, if they can bounce right back and win against Nashville, then especially in a divisional game, that's certainly going to help them get right back on track. And they certainly want that before there's a little break at Christmas. But I just didn't love the way they played, especially in their own zone in the last couple of games. And it looked a little bit more like what we saw last year than it
Yeah.
has all of this year. And I know from the way Rick Bowness has reacted to games sometimes, he thought it was a great hockey game, and in this case, he was pretty positive about the way the Jets played against
Yeah.
Vegas. But I don't think he can be happy about the fact that they're kind of loose defensively the last couple of games.
No, I agree with you. I mean, his comments on Tuesday morning before the Vegas game were directed kind of at all of that. He didn't like the looseness. He didn't like the high danger chances against. He hasn't liked the rush chances against. He talked about this team needing to tighten up a bit. I'm not entirely sure they tightened up a ton against Vegas, and part of the reason why I think that is just simply because um, it wasn't a tight game. A 6-5 game isn't often a tight game. Connor Hellebuck didn't have his best game. But you can kind of, I think maybe one of the biggest things that I kind of took out of that is like Connor Hellebuyck has been so good for this team. He's won games essentially by himself with the saves that he's made or pulled them. I remember the Vegas game back earlier in the season where he made like 50 some odd saves and he pulls his team into overtime. So they get a point. They obviously lose that one in overtime. But, what you'd like to see is the players elevate at some time to win the game for their goalie. And that didn't happen last night. They tried. Mark Scheifele scores a hat trick. I don't know the last time that the Jets had a hat trick in a game and lost. In all of Mark Scheifele's 6 hat tricks that he's scored, that's been something that's been a hallmark of all of those, is that they've won every time, right? Like it's not often that you see a hat trick by a guy and then they lose, but such is the case when you give up 6 goals and you score 5 of your own, and the hat trick goal came with 2 seconds left in the game. I just think that I'm not sure like there's been a focus. I mean, again, it's really hard to kind of know why last night was the way it was, because if they are all sick or there's a big thing, that's a pretty good performance, right? But at the end of the day, I think you have to look at the trends, and this is something that Rick Bowness said. He kind of he admitted this is a trend that they need to fix, is the rush chances against just some of the high danger grade A shots that they're allowing, those types of things. And I think that's kind of where they are at this point, is that they need to just tighten up defensively more than anything, because the offense was there. I mean, they scored on the power play, but the PK wasn't great last night. One of those rare off games for the penalty kill where they give up 2 on 3 of the power play attempts that Vegas had. And Vegas, not the strongest team right now. They're missing a huge bunch of guys, from Petrolangelo to Shea Theodore to Zach Whitecloud to Jack Eichel. So those are games where you want to kind of take advantage, and the Jets didn't. So, sickness aside, I think they need to come out on Thursday against Nashville, and you kind of got to put the boots to Nashville. They're not the best team right now, and you need to kind of make a statement. They talked about making, last night or on Tuesday night, it was a statement game. Well, the statement was made that the Vegas Golden Knights have swept them this year, and they're at the top of the Western Conference standings, and now the Jets are second in the Central. So it's so crazy how the NHL, there's just massive swings, right? I mean, the Jets go from the top of the Central to second place. They go from top of the Western Conference on points percentage, or now they're in second place, to Vegas. Again, it's not a crisis at the moment. The sky isn't falling. The Jets have lost 2 straight. Last year at this time, they had lost 5 in a row and 3 in a row. So, you kind of have to look at this in perspective. This team is 18-9-1 at this point still. Really good, really good record, really good where they stand. They just need to tighten up and get back to the hockey that was winning them 3-4 games in a row, and get back to that against some of the tougher opponents in the NHL.
Yeah, and they not very often this year, and may even been the first time that they lost when they scored 3 goals or more.
I mean, the first time this year.
Yeah, they've generally been the team that comes out ahead when they get that many, and that speaks a lot to how well Connor Hellebuyck has played, how well they've played defensively overall. When they can get a few goals, a little bit of run support, they usually win. But in this case, that game was so back and forth. Right. It didn't really work out that way. But I some other guys that I wanted to mention, obviously Mark Scheifele getting the hat trick in a losing cause. He's having a great season. I think he's on pace for close to 50 goals. He's really putting the puck in the net, and we see that, I think, as being part of the rejuvenization that came with the addition of Rick Bowness as head coach. But for them to get a goal from Sam Gagner on the 4th line, for them to get a goal from Morgan Barron on the 3rd line, and I mean, that Morgan Barron goal was all hard work from everybody on that line. Yeah. Those are positives. The fact is that they get 3 goals from their top center. They get a goal from a 3rd line winger and another 4th line winger. Those are really good positives for the Jets going forward. And I think in most games, because they usually do win when they get 5 goals, if you get a hat trick from your top center and goals from your 4th line and your 3rd line, you're probably going to win most times out. So you have to look at it as some positive in that sense. But again, as you said, if you're going to give up goals the way that they did, And
Yeah.
you can't let guys like Mark Stone have that kind of space. You
No.
can't let, like Chandler Stevenson had an unbelievable game with his speed. He was separating himself all day long, and therefore a lot of that led to why the Jets were struggling off the rush. But we know that's not the first time that they struggled off the rush. That loss to Columbus on home ice featured a lot of that as well. So how did they start to turn that around? You know, I talked to Nick Schmidt about that a little bit a couple of weeks ago, and he certainly said that it's it's really a bearing down situation and really playing your position better. Are they slipping into some old habits here that's causing this off the rush problems to exist?
It's interesting. I think there's a little bit of that, but I think Rick Bowness needs to probably look at his defensive pairs and see if there's a way to maybe change them. And a part of the way is, if you don't want to move Dylan DeMello off of Josh Morrissey's line because you like how that pair shuts down the other team, that's fine. But then maybe put Mio Pionk with Dylan Samberg and put Dylan and Schmidt back together. Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt. That was a good pair early on in the season. And they went away from it because it wasn't working with Josh and Neil's play, and he may or not be dealing with an injury right now or whatever it might be that he's playing through. His play dipped a little bit, but it's come back in the last few games for Neil Pionk. And I think, that could be whatever it is, that he's been dealing with, or just, not been playing well, whatever it is. He's kind of dealt with that. So I think the next part of this is maybe trying to move around those deep pairings again, knowing what you have in Dylan Samberg. And I thought Dylan Samberg has been playing well. Out of a giveaway last night that led to, well, at least a shot against. I think Dylan Samberg, you take him out of the lineup as they did to put Logan Stanley back in. Logan Stanley gets injured, kind of messed up a little bit of the rhythm for Samberg. I thought Samberg, what he has shown in his games, he played 15 games last year. The more that he plays, the better that he becomes, the more confident he reads the play better. So I think part of this is just going to be that. I don't think that this is more of a team defense issue. I think it's just, they got to figure out a little bit on the reads. And so I think it's just focus, right? I mean, this is kind of what the players have been saying. It's just kind of getting back to kind of the focus of what this team wants to do on defense. Team defense, fine, sure. But, I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bit of a switch on the blue line just to kind of reinvigorate it a little bit. And then part of it too is, can't get into run and guns. The Jets can run and gun with any of the best of them. They did it last night. But this team is the best when they're not doing that, right? When they're playing, grinding down shifts. You mentioned the fourth line there. I thought the fourth line responded very, very well to Rick Bowness essentially calling them out, taking Axel Johnson-Fjallby out of the lineup and inserting Kevin Stenlund into the lineup, who they just called up. Rick Bowness isn't a guy that's going to take too much time with something that's not working. And I thought the fourth line responded really well to that, essentially that public call out. Obviously that happened in the room before any of us in the media heard about it. Point is, I think this team just needs to tighten up, buckle down. Those are just cliche words that the players will use, but we've seen this team be able to do that, and they just got to do it again. I mean, it's as simple as that. They got to get back to what has made them successful. I think there's a good foundation of that now, so it won't be hard to find. I think that's maybe the biggest thing, but they just kind of have to get back to that. That's kind of it sounds simple. I think it is simple, but it's just maybe a mindset and a focusing that they got to do to kind of get that back on, get the ball rolling again on team defense.
Well, it sounds simple, but it's also wise, and I appreciate your thoughts there. The Jets back on the ice against Nashville on Thursday night, off to Vancouver and Seattle, and then still 2 more games before Christmas in Boston and Washington, and, and 2 more road games, and it's a busy month for them. And the fact that they've lost a couple in a row, they need to nip that in the bud very quickly. For Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman. You've been watching Jet Setting on WinnipegSun.com.